Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is still doing well, and welcome to this early morning, middle of the night bonus upload. Before we jump into it, a couple quick links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman, Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click that like button. Takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads that I put out daily, click the bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment and share the video. Why? Well, because all of these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go. They definitely do matter, and they are appreciated. And with that, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump into this early morning, middle of the night bonus upload, shall we? Today's first encounter. In the mid-90s, I had just started college at Central Michigan University, where I was studying graphic design and broadcasting. And in the summertime, I would go back home to Manistee County, which is further north, on the coast of Lake Michigan. A large national forest, the Manistee National Forest, stretches throughout several counties in northwest Lower Michigan. Despite being densely forested, there are no significant large predators. There are black bear, but little else. Wolves, grizzly, mountain lions, etc. are practically extinct in this region. I assume it's because the southern portion of the state is so populated, with cities like Grand Rapids, Detroit, Ann Arbor, Kalamazoo, Lansing, and Saginaw, all located in the lower half of the peninsula, as well as areas like Toledo and Chicago beyond that. Otherwise, the state is surrounded by the Great Lakes. A large beast could enter is from the north, and it would have to cross the very large, long, busy Mackinac Bridge that connects the lower and upper peninsulas. One of the things I love about northwest Lower Michigan is that there simply isn't much of a threat of being attacked by a predator, other than crossing a black mama bear and her cubs. The danger of these woods are relatively low. Unless you're a child, there may be the danger of coyotes or bobcat. That's about it. We don't even have many poisonous snakes, spiders, or predatory marine life in the Great Lakes. The Lower Peninsula is one of the safest places that I know of to spend time outdoors in nature, save for this one eerie legend. My friends and I had grown up with the Dogman legend, and we had heard the famous local song written about it. According to the legend, the Dogman appears every 10 years, and there are usually reports of sightings during those years. This particular year, we knew that the Dogman sightings were happening. There was a story on the local news of a large creature that attacked a farmer's cattle in the nearby county, I believe it was Wexford, and left at least one bloody carcass in the farmer's field. It was clear something very large had ripped these animals apart. This was no prank done by humans. There were large claw marks and teeth marks on these poor animals, and I think there was some mention of a tall fence that sustained some damage by something large that had climbed over it. In any case, my friends and I were intrigued, so we would often go on Dogman hunts throughout the summer. I feel I should mention that these hunts were unarmed ones. We'd just drive around the local woods at night, often finding dirt roads and driving endlessly from one township to another. There is national forest in this area, so there are thick, deep wooded areas everywhere, and long stretches of miles with no signs of civilization in sight, other than the 2-track road we were on. Typically, we'd be in my car, and I'd have 1 or 2 people with me at a time. On our trips, I would often play some haunting music, like Dead Can Dance, to make things even spookier. We'd be pretty gutsy sometimes, go so far as to park the car with the windows down and the engine off, waiting in the dark for something to show up. I don't know if we were being brave or just dumb. I think there was part of us that didn't quite believe the tales. I know I had my doubts, but like a scary book you can't put down, we would regularly go out at night and drive around just for the thrills or something to do. There's not much else to do in a small northern Michigan town when you're a teen. By the end of the summer, we had not one single Dogman sighting, although we had some pretty spooky moments along the way. It was pretty fun. All in all, it was time well spent with my friends, despite our efforts leaving us feeling a little bit let down. It nearly confirmed to me that these stories were fake. I had grown up by the forest my entire life and would think nothing about venturing out at night on foot, sometimes without a flashlight. I never heard so much as a dog bark or heard any animal larger than a squirrel. There's virtually no man-eating animals that live in Michigan's lower peninsula. Even though black bears are sometimes spotted, they rarely attack people, unless they are protecting their cubs. I never felt I had any reason to fear the woods at night, although these Dogman hunts would sometime get the hair on the back of my neck standing up when my imagination got the better of me. It was part of the fun, I guess. On one of the last evenings of summer break, before we headed back to college, my best friend Tony and I decided to go on a Dogman hunt. Tony was not one of my usual companions on these road trips. Most often it was my friend Jessica, who, despite scaring very easily, enjoyed the spooky adventure of the hunt nonetheless. Tony, on the other hand, was unafraid by these tales. I think he was probably more skeptical than I, but he was intrigued enough to go along on the final hunt with me. He attended Oakland University near Detroit, so this would be the last time we would be able to spend some quality time just hanging out before the fall semester began. It was one of the few times Tony went out Dogman hunting with me, and it may have been the one and only time we'd ever take his vehicle instead of mine. So on this particular night, he was driving his car and I was in the passenger seat. It seemed to be going without incident. I think we mostly talked the whole time and didn't get too worked up that night. We had only a few days left before we parted ways to go back to our respective universities, so I think we had more interest in shooting the breeze than looking for the alleged mythical creature that probably didn't exist. We were deep into the Manistee National Forest between Manistee and Wexford counties when we decided to head back. We made it back to the main highway, M55, which is a very dark and remote stretch of wooded highway between Manistee and Cadillac, which was in the neighboring Wexford County. It's one of those highways that you can almost drive you crazy at night because of the seemingly endless miles of dark forest, even though M55 is the only main throughway between the two towns. There's not much of anything along that stretch beside a couple of small villages, some bridges, a maximum security prison. There's simply nothing out there. We weren't very far from Manistee, though not yet close enough to see the glow of the city lights in the distance. There was still thick forest on both sides of us. However, there was a car behind us with its light shining into our cab, and 3 more cars far ahead of us on the highway with their headlights on, heading towards us. We weren't even looking for the Dogman anymore, and totally unprepared for what was about to happen next. As far as I was concerned, the night had wound down, and our last Dogman hunt had come to an end. Suddenly, something large climbed out of a ditch up ahead on the right side of the road, which was my side of the car as I was the passenger. I don't recall Tony or I making a sound as he quickly applied the brakes, bringing his car to a slow crawl, while this creature crawled out onto the road in front of us. The car behind us and the ones ahead of us all did likewise. I'm sure all of us saw this thing clamber out of the ditch onto the highway. My very first thought was that it looked like a man in a gorilla suit, but with the other cars around us now shining their brights into our eyes, it was hard to make out. It walked hunched over, partially on all fours and partially upright. At times, its arms seemed to be dragging low and barely making contact with the road. It looked more like an extremely tall man that was hunched over and scurrying like an animal to cross the road. I couldn't make out details as to what its silhouette was in the bright beams of the other cars, but Tony and I could tell that it was very hairy and very large. However, it was far too thin to be a bear, although my next thought was that it was perhaps a very sick, emaciated bear. But even then, it did not move like a bear, more like a chimpanzee or a gorilla, with its hands/paws hanging low, sometimes touching the ground. Tony and I just sat in silent shock as this thing moved in front of us. We were quite close to it, as was the closest vehicle facing us. By the time Tony had slowed the car down to a snail's pace, this thing was only 10 yards away from the hood of the vehicle, if that. Tony was smart not slamming on the brakes, as we had a car right behind us, but because we had reduced the speed from 60 to 55 to almost 0, it caused us to come upon this creature quite fast before we could safely yield. Make out the shape of its head as it was hunched over, and by the time we were close enough to make better sense of this dark, hairy, silhouetted figure, it had already passed in front of us and was crossing in front of the opposite traffic just before it dove into the other ditch and headed into the tree line. So at our closest angle, we were looking mostly at its backside. With its head lowered, it was impossible to see its face. I wanted to get a better look at this thing before it disappeared back into the Manistee National Forest, so I told Tony to pull the car over. He obliged with no objection. Like me, he was curious to find out what his eyes had just seen, but unlike me, he didn't get out of the car. The other vehicles drove on by as we parked on the shoulder. I got out of the car immediately and walked toward the back of the car to try to see anything, but the creature had vanished. I assumed into the woods. I didn't think I was yet convinced this wasn't some prank, hence the bold move of exiting the vehicle in the middle of the darkened forest road at night. But as Tony and I made our way back into town trying to figure out what the hell we had just seen, things just didn't add up in our heads. If this was a man in an animal suit of some kind playing a prank, he was pretty foolish for leaping out onto the darkened highway between two lanes of traffic, traveling at least 55 miles an hour in both directions. A moment too late, and he would have been roadkill. And where the hell did he come from? There's nothing out there. The nearest sign of human life is the prison. I never heard any reports of a prison break, but if there had been, it would have been one of the weirdest prison escapes in history. Why the animal suit? This thing was clearly covered in thick hair, and if it was a human, it was a very tall one. Plus, there was something very non-human about the way it moved. Even though it was practically on all fours and hunched over, it appeared very long. So if it was a person, it'd have to be at least 7 feet tall. The back legs in particular seemed rather long and gangling. Far too long to be a bear, although I wouldn't describe its entire body as being either skinny or overly muscular. This was definitely not a bear, whatever it was. After mulling it over many times in the years since, I'm convinced we saw a Dogman that night. I did not rule out Bigfoot either, but being that it was the year of the Dogman, I'm leaning more towards that. I don't know of many Bigfoot sightings in Michigan. If so, I've never heard of one. And somewhere out there, there is at least 3 other vehicles with occupants who saw the same thing we did. If you're one of them, I'd love to hear your version of what you saw that night. As for me, I'll never go out into the woods at night anymore, and I rarely walk at night, even on a well-lit road. Also, I actually told this story over the phone to someone who was doing a Dogman investigation for a show that I was told would air on the Sci-Fi Channel several years ago. I don't know if I remembered to tell the guy the part about getting out of the car. It was years ago when I was interviewed over the phone about it by one of the show's producers, maybe 2007, so at least 10 years after the incident took place. I don't know if the show even aired. If so, I never caught it. But if it did, perhaps you have heard the story before. I can only assume that they created a reenactment for the episode based on my testimony. I even emailed the guy a drawing I had made of what I remembered of the creature. If anyone knows if the episode is out there, please let me know. I don't recall the name of the program or the producer I spoke with. He mentioned something about it airing on the Sci-Fi Network, but having worked in television myself, I know how these things can fall through the cracks or end up on the cutting room floor. Funny how he said that, because I myself was interviewed by a show that was supposed to air on the Discovery Channel, and we actually did 2 takes, but it must have just fallen through the cracks. Oh well. Today's second terrifying encounter is a possible feral human. This may be very disturbing for some of you. I could never tell this story in person, but it's easier for me just to share it this way. When my wife and I were quite a bit younger, we decided that we would spend the 1976 bicentennial outdoors. We lived in Pueblo, Colorado at the time, and decided to go hiking, fishing, and camping along the Lime Creek between Durango and Silverton. There wasn't anything other than the brookies in the creek, but they were plentiful and fun to catch. We left our car by the side of the road along Old Lime Creek Road, about 5 miles in from the highway, and packed in upstream along the creek with our shepherd Rebel. It only took us about an hour to get where we wanted to camp, a nice meadow beside the creek just before Slot Canyon that required you to swim to get any further upstream. Either that or take a several-mile detour. We camped uneventfully that night, the 3rd of July, enjoying the sounds of the rippling creek and nature all around us. It was such a nice night that we just slept out under the stars and didn't bother to pitch our little backpacking tent. A little cool, but we had a fire going and our lightweight 30-degree bags, so we were pretty comfortable. We had breakfast, packed up, and we all swam our way up the creek to the next wide spot with a bit of a bank in the canyon, only about 150 yards or so. Now, Rebel was never one to turn down a chance to get wet, but we had to do a bit of coaxing to get him to follow us up creek. We fished, splashed upstream a bit, and before we knew it, it was lunchtime. We thought we'd fry up some of those brookies, but we were in this slot canyon that terminated in a fairly deep pool with about a 10-foot rocky waterfall at the end of it. We decided that I would scale the waterfall and pull the dog and the packs up, and then I'd help Maggie up. It was fairly difficult, even with the help of an old cable left over from the mining operation that was hanging down the side of the wall of the canyon. It took a lot of effort, and though we finally made it, we looked back down the waterfall and wondered what the heck we were thinking. Rebel was none too happy about it either, and seemed to get more irritable by the minute. Enough driftwood at the rocky top of the falls to get a little fire starting, to get the fish fried up, but that was about it. You know that uneasy feeling that several others have mentioned? It was like a switch had turned on and we all of a sudden became aware of our surroundings. It grew like cancer and actually watched the hair on the back of Rebel's neck stand. Maggie felt it as well. We both noticed that it was getting dark fast down in this canyon. First thought in my head was a cat, and I actually felt a bit better about that because I figured that a cat would leave us be between the fire and the dog. I told Maggie what I thought, and she seemed to feel a little bit better as well. I didn't want to get caught in the dark in the canyon for a bunch of reasons, flash flood, etc. I spied what looked like a mine shaft about 200 feet above us. A heck of a steep climb, but it looked like our best bet. We pulled out our flashlights, and by the time we reached it, it was pitch black. The dog was a mess by this point, whipping around in circles, whining, yelping, and generally being a real pain in the ass. Maggie and I were drenched with sweat and immediately began to freeze. July in the mountains is a weird thing. I have seen blizzard conditions before, but this was like someone turned on the deep freeze. We were at what looked like the start of the mine. It only went back about 10 feet, but there was evidence of fires at the mouth, and they curiously looked fresh. I was too tired to think more about it. I knew we had to get out of our wet clothes, pitch the tent, and climb in our bags before we got hypothermia. That was no fun, let me tell you, having to do all of that by the light of our rapidly dying flashlight. And there was no firewood anywhere close. I cursed myself several times for letting things get this far out of control. We finally got the tent pitched right there in the back of this little cave, buck naked, as we had no dry clothes left. The sleeping bags were slightly damp as well, even though we had stuffed them in plastic garbage bags before our swimming expedition up the canyon. We froze. It was miserable. About 1 a.m, I called Rebel into the tent for a little heat. The dog seemed to have calmed down greatly, and with the added heat, we drifted off. Sometime during the night, I heard something that just about woke me up. I was still in a haze, so I fell asleep again immediately. I woke up one other time because I thought I heard Yet Rebel yip a little bit. But again, I was in and out. I put my hand out to pet his head, and he licked my hand. I fell asleep again. Maggie later said she fell asleep the same time as I did, but never woke up at all during the night. I woke up to the most horrible noise I had ever heard come out of a 100-pound woman. Just the most god-awful shrieks I had ever heard. I never want to hear them again. I opened my eyes just in time to see a man at the mouth of the shaft, silhouetted against the morning daylight, looking back at us with the most twisted, evil grin I had ever seen on a face of another human being. I scrambled to get free of my tightly zipped bag and the little tent while he just crouched there grinning. When I was just about free, he disappeared. Now, we were granola-chugging, tree-hugging, anti-gun nature freaks at the time, so the only thing I had any consequence as a weapon was my camp knife. I found it after what seemed like hours of searching, but really was probably under a minute. I very cautiously made my way to the entrance, millimeters at a time. This guy was gone. Time Maggie started screaming and whimpering again, so I rushed back to the shaft. She had struggled out of the tent and was pointing at what used to be Rebel. His head was nearly severed, and the tent and the bags were ruined with all the blood everywhere. She had blood all over her, so the first thing I did was make sure she wasn't injured. Then I checked myself. We were okay. It was all Rebel's blood. We put on our still damp, cold clothes from the night before, and then we noticed that our boots were gone. We were in trouble. I had some paracord, so we tied some shirts and towels around our feet and climbed back down toward the creek. We left everything in the mine except for the knife and some stuff that we shoved in our pockets. It took us 8 hours to get back down to the car. We were like hamburgers. Hands, feet, arms, legs scraped raw, bruised, and bleeding. We jumped in. The car started right up, thankfully, and we left a dust cloud that blanketed the valley as we sped down the rough trail toward Durango. We limped into the sheriff's office, and we looked like hell. We got our story out, my wife through tears, and me talking way too fast, but we finally got it out. The deputy said that they would go out first thing in the morning and asked us to stay in town. We had no money for a hotel, so they let us stay in a cell after we showered and changed into prison jumpsuits. We were there at the jail waiting for the expedition returned with a convoy of 3 trucks. I noticed that all the officers, who were quite wet and filthy, gave us dirty looks as they passed us, and the deputy we had talked to the day before herded us back to his office. Then came the interrogation. Turns out that some animal had spread the dog's remains all over the slide to the creek, and he said there was nothing else there. No tent, no backpacks, nothing. He asked us if we had any drugs. I didn't want to admit to him that we had some herbs, so I denied it. It was clear we were fighting a losing battle. They had come to the conclusion that we were wandering out in the woods high on LSD while a mountain lion had gotten our dog. The bastard even made us change back into our filthy clothes and give back the jumpsuits right there and then. He told us that he better not see us again. We left. Maggie was sobbing. I have never been back to Durango. The thing that I still have nightmares about the years later, I have never mentioned this to Maggie, is the second time I woke up when I heard Rebel yelp. Was that when his throat was cut? And if it was it the dog who licked my hand before I fell back to sleep? I still go out into the wilderness, never overnight, out well before dark, only with other people, and always with a big gun. I respect animals, but I fear people. Today's third encounter. Can someone please help me? I need to know what this is. I swear this is some form of wolfman, dogman, werewolf, shapeshifter, whatever you want to call it. It's living in my home province. I've heard them, and I swear I've seen them. I grew up in a rural community in Nova Scotia where the closest kids were a 10-minute walk away. We always had wildlife living in our backyard, from bear to coyote, owls, fox, even skunks and porcupine. I was very familiar, as my father was a hunter and taught us the sounds and tracks and even the awful smells of the life around us. I'm 20 now and live in a large town on the outskirts of Halifax. I remember the first signs starting around the age of 14 and 15. I'd be trying to sleep with my window open at night during the summer, and I would hear these mutilated howls. I never heard the likes of these before, which would terrify me into slamming my window shut, closing the blinds, and locking what I could around the house. I would spend time outdoors or walking home from the bus stop and see massive paw prints, or sometimes barefoot human prints, on the sandy gravel road. There were these moments of awful stench. My mother would always claim it was just the coons in the compost bins again. But there was no way on earth that's what it was. I began to spend less and less time out there due to the feeling of being watched and feeling unsafe. I didn't know what to do. My dad left my mom, and my stepfather was a city man who thought I was simply scared to be out. There was one event 3 years ago when I was 17. We had a family friend who had a camp 40 minutes out in the middle of nowhere, and of course, being myself, I wanted to go and hang out with all my friends near my age, so we went. No cell service, no plumbing, all electricity was solar powered, outhouse, and a camp on the lake. None of my friends were there, and all the adults went down 3 camps off for drinks, and I was stuck with the kids 13 and under, free babysitting, right? Anyway, to the point. I had settled in and was reading a book with my flashlight while the kids were watching a movie on their tablets. What's the point of camping if you're on your electronics? And I heard the sound of something or someone in the driveway, footsteps on the gravel. I got up from my book and went to see if it was one of the adults from the group, but as soon as I stuck my head out of the door, I noticed an awful rotten stench when the sound stopped. And there was no one there. I swear I had never felt so chilled as I did that moment. The hair on my neck raised. I slammed the door shut loudly and locked it. That night, when the adults were back, we paired up to go out to the outhouse before bed. Of course, myself and the family friend were the last two out there. I had done what I needed to do, and I was waiting for my friend. That's when the twigs snapped and the chills were back. I saw movement. A large, dark, almost black dog shape was off in the tree line. I froze. It was darting around so fast. I wouldn't have believed the speed if I hadn't seen it myself. My friend came out of the outhouse, and the latch snapped my attention from it to her. She was concerned about how pale I was. When I tried to point it out, it was gone. We went inside, and all throughout the night I could hear howling and the barks and the sounds from the outside. It reminded me of the whole laughter sounds of a hyena. But every so often there was this awful, deep, choppy howl of a sound no coyote could make. It wasn't the scream of a dying rabbit or the laughter from a fox. It was not natural, it was twisted. I tell this because about a month ago I was out with my boyfriend for a late night drive along the coast, off a distance from the city. While he was driving and we were talking, we both saw something massive. It was dark, almost black in color, dog-like in structure, and there was this awful, unforgettable stench in the air. We both were shouting and sped off away from it. I convinced him it was just a black bear, but there was no way. It was far too large and too thin to be a bear in late summer. I know it was that thing. But any time I tell someone about it, I'm told I'm crazy. I'm just hearing about coyotes, as we don't have wolves in our province. Unfortunately, I can't move away because of medical conditions, and I have to stay close to my family. I've not done a lot of research on these creatures, but I know a little. I've heard a few stories that they like to terrorize people and enjoy scaring them for fun. Thank you. Nova Scotia, the peninsula. Today's fourth part of the upload is another sighting off of Nova Scotia. There was a Dogman sighting in Glengarry, Nova Scotia, March 9th, 2014. Robert McLean was driving home from a party in town around 2 in the morning when a deer ran across the road about 50 yards in front of him. A big animal chased after the deer, but just before tumbling into the crevasse, it stood on its back legs and stared into the headlights, its eyes glowing, and then it was gone. This wasn't the only evidence that was found that weekend. A local farmer by the name of Redacted found a dead cow in the field behind his barn, completely eviscerated with huge chunks of meat missing, large bloody tracks leading off into the woods. It's important to note that Glengarry does not have a large population, mostly scattered homes surrounded by woods. It is an area where only a few people hunt, as hunters constantly complain about being watched. A survey of the area around the possible sighting turned up a few deer tracks and a reddish smear just off of the road down over the bank, but a sample could not be taken due to the steep nature of the area. Today's final encounter. People on the northern Manitoba Reserve are avoiding the land around a lake after 3 sled dogs were gutted amid the reports of a strange creature on the loose. Chief Joe Dentos of the Northlands First Nation in Le Broche said Thursday that he had never seen an animal kill in the manner that befell the dogs. The dogs were found gutted on the island in the nearby Reindeer Lake on Sunday morning, and another 4 dogs had gone missing. Manitoba conservation officers have been looking into the matter and have taken the bodies of the dead dogs for an analysis. Chief Joe said some people have claimed to have spotted this mysterious creature around the lake, but did not give a description. There were signs that people had seen something while they were on the lake fishing and did not know what type of animal it was on the land. People believe this mysterious creature killed the dogs. They are afraid right now. People are afraid to go out on the lake or near the lake for fishing and to use the beaches around the lake. And I think, who wouldn't be if something like this would happen to another lake? I think people would be scared, and I think that's how it is right now. Chief Joe said the band has advised people to stay away from the lake for the time being. Just to clarify, this is not an aquatic animal. This is an animal that was seen around this lake, around Reindeer Lake in Manitoba. People were seeing it while fishing, seeing it out on the lake while they were on the lake. And these animals were found around this area. Just wanted to clarify. I'll throw in a bonus episode for the 1st of November's upload. Between my boyfriend and I, we have 2 very large dogs. One is a 95-pound male German Shepherd, and the other is an 80-pound male Husky German Shepherd mix. Because the 2 of them are really big and strong, I cannot walk them both at the same time. I rarely walk them alone, but on the off chance I do, I walk the German Shepherd mix while the other one stays back. A few weeks ago, I went on the morning walk with the German Shepherd mix while my boyfriend was at work. It must have been around 10 in the morning. It was pretty bright outside, although a little cloudy and cold since Colorado weather is starting to get cooler. I was walking through a little neighborhood toward the trail that I always take. It leads to an open space where we usually walk the dogs. We take this trail pretty frequently since the trail is right in the neighborhood. As we get to the area where the trail begins, our dog starts going crazy. He's usually incredibly well behaved on walks, and he has really good leash manners. But he started barking and growling and jumping. I had no idea what he saw. I couldn't see anything. I kept telling him it was okay and to try to calm him down. But then all of the brush up ahead suddenly moved as if this huge, large animal had run through it. This made me super nervous since I didn't see anything, and I was alone, so we turned back and went to the house. I didn't think anything of it until a few days later. During the night, a few days later, I heard something while I was trying to sleep. We played it off as the house was settling since the weather was getting colder, and left it at that. The next day, there was a decapitated rabbit on the driveway near the garage door and front porch. The head was totally gone, just ripped off. Just the body was laying there. And there was a lot of blood in the driveway. I can't say for certain, but I have a feeling that whatever animal it was that we came across followed us back home and did this. We haven't seen anything since, but a few days ago I noticed some fresh blood next to an old spot that we haven't been able to get out of the cement. I've been feeling nervous anytime I go outside to let either the dogs out at night as well. And there you have it, folks. I hope you all enjoyed this early morning, middle of the night bonus as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd like to thank you for supporting the channel. It is your support that helps the channel to continue to grow and go, and what gives us all a place and a chance to share our experiences and theories judgment-free. Everyone is simply treated with the respect that we deserve. Please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, and friends. These creatures are real. These events have happened. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the truth, and God bless you all.